Hello, the Digital Journey community, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Journey podcast, where we continue to bring you real experiences from real operators. I know it's been a couple weeks off. Things have gotten a little bit crazy here in the start of the year. All blessings, all things that we're happy about, but we're happy to sync back up. And as always, I have my co-host Brandon Schaefer with me. Brandon, how's everything going today?
Oh man, it's going good. We've both been super busy. I'm excited to get back on track. We have some great guests coming up, so I'm not really looking forward to tonight, but I'm also looking forward to the future. So just to keep tuning in, keep listening, keep catching up, and I'll come into focus here. I think I'm out of focus, but I will come into focus if you're watching on YouTube. So don't worry, don't worry. I will be back. I know you can hear me crystal clear if we're on the podcast, and but if you're watching on YouTube, I will straighten up here shortly. So.
Awesome. No, and like you said, Brandon, it's great to be back. I think tonight we have, a very different topic. We haven't been able to touch on it too much, but it's one that's certainly starting to get more and more attention in the news and across the internet. So tonight we're going to dive into the power of the blockchain and the future of financial services. Without further ado, I'd love to bring on our featured guest tonight, Corey Stedman. Corey, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, hi. Thank you so very much, Brian, for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Of course. No, it's our pleasure. I know we were fortunate enough to connect on LinkedIn, connect for a few initial calls. So I'm really excited, to dive into what you're working on, the journey that you've been on so far, and really share those insights with our community. So before we dive in too much, let's just start with a brief, introduction of yourself, right? And maybe your latest venture, Greenfire, and kind of how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so my name is Corey Stedman. I'm in the cryptocurrency space. Um, Several years ago, I started Greenfire, and the idea initially was to create a company that kind of uh, merge some of my passions and try to make money from it. Um, One of those things was I liked I like TV, I like media, but I felt that television and YouTube was inadequate and Netflix was inadequate in terms of the offering and then the organization of stuff. And so I had created this platform called dot period dot TV, and essentially it was supposed to be a mix between regular television and YouTube and in a sense torrenting as well, but it didn't really work out. There were some missing pieces to it, and so I pivoted. And one of the things that I was doing before and during that time was I was into cryptocurrency. I came across cryptocurrency in 2010, 2010, 2011. Um, and I was just looking at it, studying it, and then I finally bought my first Bitcoin um, in 2012, 2013. And that's what really kickstarted a lot of stuff in regards to my passion for cryptocurrency. And so it provided this pivot point when that period wasn't really going to work out. And so a couple years ago, we um, we created Greenery, and essentially the reason why we created it was that myself and my friends, we were doing a lot of trading around 2017, 2018, and they had these elaborate spreadsheets to track all their transactions. And I was like, well, that's cool. It's really nice, but I'm not going to do that. That's too much work. There has to be an automated way to do this, this pain that I'm having or this, this hurdle that I see to really, granular uh, tracking and writing down of all my transactions, I'm sure someone else has come across it. Someone else has solved this. It's out there. I just have to look for it. And lo and behold, I did not find it. And so I was like, you know what? Let me try and cobble this together however I can. And I put together something super crude, but it really got the idea across, and it made it to me. Um, it showed that it was viable, that it was possible to do this, and we're at a my partners and I we're down at Wall Street. We got picked up by a VC firm to do something else in cryptocurrency. It was a triangular arbitrage trading bot, essentially. And that didn't work out for a myriad of reasons, but it was a very good experience. And so we were pursuing that. We were pursuing the gain and loss calculator, which is what Greenery was called at the time. And when the doors of that closed, I continued building on the gain and loss calculator, and it became Greenery, what it is today. And so essentially, long story short, it is a cryptocurrency wallet with accounting functionality, and it serves as a foundation in regards to our cryptocurrency offerings and how we intend to make the cryptocurrency ecosystem better.
That's amazing, Corey. And we're definitely going to be diving a lot more into Greenery. As we probably all know, cryptocurrencies definitely gained much more awareness over the last 5 to 10 years, right? Especially since 2010. So I'm sure a bunch of today's listeners are familiar with at least the broad topic of cryptocurrencies, and we'll be sure to be diving in and kind of help build, a better perspective of where everything is and specifically where your product fits in. But something that I caught, as you shared your journey so far, right, and the stories that, all came to a culmination of forming Greenery and really getting to where you are today. The key lesson, it seems, is, even though certain opportunities didn't work out in the full scale in which you hoped them for, right, there is still always lessons, right, and things that you could pull away from those and attribute to the next step that you were taking in your journey. So I'm wondering, whether it was between forming, more of that first video service company, right, or building the trading bot, what was one particular lesson that you can really remember from one of those experiences that has impacted your mission with Greenery so far?
A number of things. My number one mantra, number zero rather, that I tell everyone is to write everything down, document everything, write it down. The more you write down things, the easier it is to remember, the easier it is to retrieve, get into the habit of archiving stuff, and just me practicing. So I write every day. I write in the morning, I write noon, night. I have an idea, write it down, type it up. And so I have this catalog of not only ideas, but anecdotes, X, Y, and Z. And what that has helped me do is it makes it a whole lot easier for me to iterate on an idea or iterate on something. I'm not starting from scratch in a sense. And so in regards to my past, what some may call like failures or whatever, what it taught me is that, well, number one, always write things down. But number two, what is there to extrapolate from that experience? With that period, what I learned a number of things. Learn how to interface with developers, learn Git. I was being hard-headed for some time in regards to properly learning HTML and JavaScript and Git and GitHub. I mean, I knew it to a degree, but I figured, well, if I write this stuff down and I tell the developers to do this and that, magically everything will appear just as I. Not at all. Not at all. Never. You have to be diligent. You have to have a constant flow of communication with developers, and this is something I had to learn over years. I had to have many failures in a sense, lost money, frustration, um, redos. But what it did is it prepared me for this stage in my life in regards to Greenery, well, Greenfire and Greenery specifically, in that I'm now able to vet developers better. I'm able to audit code. I'm able to, as crude as it can be, make UX, UI mock-ups, hey, this is exactly what I want. And, you got to move this here, move that there. And, write out all the philosophy behind how the product is supposed to function and the overall arc and idea. And so those are the things that I really I was able to extract from those experiences. So, I mean, obviously, when it comes to entrepreneurship and business, no one wants to lose money. No one wants to, waste effort. No one wants to burn time. But these things, you can't have success without failure. You can't have, listen, LeBron James or Michael Phelps or none of these athletes or, listen, they've lost, they've gotten injured, and they are not as great as they are now without those compounding failures that has led up to the success. So, you just got to take it in stride.
Definitely. No, and I love, writing it down. And I think a lot of people, like you said, right, especially in the early stages of any journey, there's a lot of decisions being made on a daily basis, right, across the board, and all these different hats from, managing developers or other employees, right, to managing other aspects of your partners or operations or finances of the business. And it can be hard to remember, what you did last time, right, or what your previous thoughts were. So I definitely like writing it down. I do a similar thing on a weekly or monthly basis against the goals that we're trying to achieve. What approach did we try? Is it on pace? Is it slowing down? What pivots can you make? Because I think often when you just keep going from memory, right, our brains can do loops, and you just always keep coming back to the same solution. So I really liked how you mentioned that, and how you mentioned you compounded all of those experiences. And that's, what I think a lot of us just try to do, right? And it's that awareness to the decisions that you made that allow you to make better ones going forward. But if you're not having some system of keeping track of that one way or another, you may find yourself following the same trail. Brandon, I know you like to write some things down as well. Do you find that helps you prevent, following the same process or going down the same trail where maybe there's an opportunity somewhere else?
Yeah, Corey's definitely speaking my language, man. I have a system. In fact, I have I use Google Sheets and Google Docs all the time, just so I don't lose anything. That's kind of my central repository. But I have a Google Doc that's just like startup business ideas. And I'll just wake up in the morning, and first thing I do is usually I'll just send myself a text, or I'll send myself a quick email, and then I'll just put them on that sheet just for a rainy day. Now, 90% of them, 99, actually 100% of them, I usually never go back to, but they all spark different ideas, perhaps across my life and so forth. So I'm a big advocate for when you first wake up in the morning. I think when we dream in, like a lot of stuff can actually come to us, not in any crazy way or anything else like that. But when you first wake up in the morning, always have a pen and paper. At least for me, I always have a pen and paper next to me. The second piece is a person like myself, I don't have time to learn code and stuff like that. So a shameless plug for you, Brian. Incipient. They do a phenomenal job. This is not a commercial for us or anything else like that. But if you do not have time to pick and go through the process, and it can be a long process, and like Corey said, it takes a lot of money, and you work with somebody and you figure out, they can only do so much, and then you have to work with somebody else. So sometimes having a project manager definitely assists in that. But lastly, Corey, you mentioned in all these shows, we get on here and we talk about a specific topic, but underneath is the moral of the story is that everybody that's on here hasn't had a cakewalk to get to where they want to go. Everyone we've had on here has lost money. Everyone we've had on here has struggled. Everyone we have on here has like had to, just so many different experiences. And that's why we're here today, right? Because we're able to smile. We're able to look back upon that. So it's great to have you here, Corey. And I'm interested to keep on moving on.
Yes, certainly. Sometimes when you're in the middle of your journey, there's this woe is me mentality. It's like, oh my gosh, why do I have to climb this hill? Everyone else that I know, they have it so much easier. And that could be the case, but most likely it's not true if they're really trying to achieve something of that's greater than themselves. I can't think of anyone that has achieved something great. I mean, even if you look at a Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or whoever else, right? I mean, they may be hiding their scars, but I'm sure there's some battle scars that they may not really talk about, But I mean, like for instance, Elon Musk talks about it. He slept at the factory. you know, Lots of people are not willing to do that. Sleep at the factory and get down on the factory floor and participate in the manufacturing of vehicles or whatever business that you have. Which is a component of leadership, being able to not only orchestrate the orchestra, but then also be able to play the instruments as well if needed, or participate in the building of the product. And so no, it is definitely not a cakewalk at all.
Yeah, and I also love how you said just kind of get a piece of paper and map it out. Like map it out, like draw out the UX. You don't need to have some like lucid chart or anything else like that, or some crazy like different stuff. Just get a piece of paper, get a napkin, map it out, show somebody. If you don't know what you're doing, show somebody. Nobody's going to steal I'm not going to say nobody's going to steal your idea or anything else like that. I mean, always be cognizant, but so many people are so fearful that I'm going to show this person, they're going to create the next rocket. And that's typically not the case. If you work with a professional firm, you're going to sign a quick non-disclosure agreement. It's okay. So just get a pen, a paper, map it out, show somebody. That's the first step. Step one.
Yeah. No, exactly.
No, I can't agree more. And I think, Corey, that really segues us into the first main topic that we want to talk about, right? I just want to make sure we give some depth, before we dive into Greenery, so people truly, understand what you guys have been able to create to date and really where your vision is into the future. And of course, that relies on a lot of what cryptocurrencies are, the markets they've been able to develop so far, and really, what seems to be like a very positive future, right? With maybe some push and pullbacks here and there, but overall, there's a lot of great people, doing a lot of great innovation across the space, just like yourself. So before diving into any particular cryptocurrencies, right? I'm sure a lot of the listeners are aware of Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, or some of the other big ones, that have made news and financial journals more regularly. But when it comes down to cryptocurrency, right, it's really based on two key ideologies in the technology world in particular, right? Ideologies and technology languages themselves. And with that, right, one side's really the growth of open source technology, communities, and innovation, as a whole, right, over the last decade or so. And the other side is, of course, the blockchain itself, right, which many may know or may not know, but is, the backbone of all cryptocurrency networks, right, as the technology that they're leveraging. So when it comes to the open source, side and that community that's resulted in a lot of cryptocurrency, how do you go about describing what cryptocurrency is to individuals and kind of how these two variables play into, what a lot of cryptocurrencies have become today?
That's a very good question. There's a couple parts. Let me see. Let me answer the last part, which is how do you describe cryptocurrency? So typically, the way that I describe cryptocurrency to people is that I'd like to talk about it from my background, which is in IT and computing. In that one of the problems that we've had in regards to computing is that there was never really a way to control um, the proliferation of data. And meaning to say, an example would be if you had a poem in a text document on your computer, right? Let's say a Maya Angelou poem. You can press Control C, Control V, or for the Mac users, Command C, Command V. Near infinity, there's no cap. I mean, obviously you have the storage on the device, but if it's a text document, it's very small, and if you have a terabyte hard drive, there's really no limit to how many times you can copy and paste that document, right? And then when you add the internet to it, then it's infinity, right? Now the problem with that is you cannot create scarcity in such an environment, and value is predicated on scarcity, whether it's diamonds, whether it's gold, silver, plutonium, whatever, right? Um, Scarcity is a key component of value, right? And if in a digital environment there is no control on scarcity, then there can be no value, right? Generally speaking. With the advent of the blockchain, what it allowed is that you're uh, able to control scarcity. You're able to um, dictate scarcity in digital environments, which was never been able to do. It was never possible before, right? So think about it, right? If you and I met up at a Starbucks or whatever, and I handed you my phone, you're expecting that when I hand you my phone, that I no longer have it in my possession. This is, core tenets of our physical reality, right? But if I send you a picture on my phone to your phone, I still have that picture. And that's the core virility on the internet, all these memes and stuff. And so the way that I explain cryptocurrency to people at a fundamental level is that if a Bitcoin were a picture, or a picture were a Bitcoin, and I sent it to you, I would no longer have it in my possession. And we know that this picture or this Bitcoin, there's only 21 million units of it. And so now we have a definitive supply, and now we cannot double spend. We cannot make duplicates of it. And so that's how I try to explain cryptocurrency to people and why it has intrinsic value. Because people think, well, it's just magic internet money, and it's silly and blah blah blah. But really and truly, this is the gravity of this technology, is that it's been able to achieve something that was really a problem for you know close to 30 years, if not more, in regards to computing, being able to create or dictate scarcity in digital environments. So, to the first part of the question, in regards to open source and what it means to cryptocurrency, is that, excuse me, um, many people may not know, but Richard Stallman and Linus Torvalds are considered to be the godfathers of open source. So Richard Stallman created the GPL, the General Public License, and Linus Torvalds years later created the Linux kernel. Um, and what the GPL allowed was, or how it came about, was that um, the time that Richard Stallman came up with it was that everything in regards to computing was super expensive. So, only libraries or only universities can afford a license to use the Unix operating system. And only, everything was siloed, every company that created stuff, everything was under wraps, everything was, they wanted to protect their IP, which I get, right? But for you to create a flourishing, vibrant computing ecosystem, you have to show your cards at some point. And so what Richard Stallman did is he was having some kind of frustration with a printer driver or printing on the network. And so he tried to reverse engineer it, and it didn't really work out or whatever, or he was successful, but that experience was the kernel for coming up with the GPL, where people would create code that was open source, that you can view the source freely. Other people can copy it, but if they wanted to, but they had their obligation was to republish their changes to the code. And so what that did is it spurred the growth of Unix-like clones, starting with Minix, and then Linus Torvalds came up with his own kernel, Unix-like kernel called Linux. And what that did is it really democratized access to computing, where at the time the only options was DOS and maybe one of the BSDs or Windows like 3.1 at the time. And by creating a Linux kernel, what happened is now you've created this ecosystem of different libraries and drivers for hardware and software, GUI software and stuff like that, which fast forward created the foundation for very cutting edge or groundbreaking open source technology to come about. Not just Linux itself, but for instance, Chromium and Safari, they came out of a project called KWebKit, which was from the KDE desktop environment, which was essentially a desktop environment that was supposed to kind of mimic Windows built on Linux. So they created their own browser called Conqueror, and Apple and Google borrowed the code and created what we have now as Safari and Chromium and Chrome. Out of the open source ecosystem, now you have all these programming languages that are not open source. Python, for instance, and WX widgets. And what came out of that was BitTorrent, which served kind of as an inspiration for the blockchain and cryptocurrency. Linus Torvalds, for them to really build the Linux kernel, you have to understand there's hundreds of people around the globe in different time zones, different languages, contributing to this Linux kernel. And how do you manage all these revisions in software in the code? Well, there's something called a revision system, and they're using, I believe, something called SVN or CVS, one or the other. And either way, the company behind that software, they did not like, they were having a tiff with the community. They wanted some of it to be closed source. They wanted to issue licenses for special purposes and whatever. Linus Torvalds said, you know what, forget you guys. And he created Git. And Git, as you now know, is the cornerstone of the internet in regards to all projects, right? And we have, out of Git, we have GitHub. And so with the advent of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin was built using Git and GitHub, and then Litecoin and all these other cryptocurrencies were created using open source software and the open source licenses. And now we have this vibrant ecosystem. So to the original question, how did open source influence cryptocurrency? The whole history, without this idea of, of Richard Stallman creating the LGPL or the GPL, and the other iterations of that license, and without Linus Torvalds creating Linux and Git, we might not have had Bitcoin as it is now. The environment to create it probably would not have occurred if those things were not in place.
That was extremely well explained, Corey, and I appreciate that. I think, what I'll try to do my best is recap it a little bit. I am fortunate enough to have a similar knowledge on the adoption and, history of open source technology.
Mm-hmm.
But I know some members in the community, may not be, as technical or involved in, projects where they're leveraging open source technology yet, right? Because there is still a transition in a lot of the other industries and across the world outside of crypto, right? Because cryptography and crypto overall, is really one of the pioneers when it comes to innovating in this space, leveraging these new modern technologies and approaches. Mm-hmm. So I'll do my best to recap a little bit, and then Brandon, I'd love to get your insights, and Corey, of course, jump in and correct me anywhere. But really, right, what crypto is, right, is it's based on the back of cryptography and blockchain, right, where cryptography is just a layer of encryption, right, and before that was there, much to your point, Corey, around scarcity. Right. The reason we were unable to create scarcity is we could not secure a digital asset, right, where it could not be copied, replicated, or hacked. Right. And because of that, it's irrelevant if you transfer the dollar, because someone would hack your dollar, times it by 1 million, right, and break the entire system, and all the cards would fold before anybody got any momentum. Yeah. So I love that, your frame of the scarcity is such a clean way to put it. And of course, the way that we were able to build scarcity is just the layer of cryptography, right, which is where crypto, the word, comes from. Mm-hmm. And the blockchain is essentially the ledger, right, in your example of using the iPhone and the phone and the photos that are on your phone, right? The blockchain is essentially the ledger or your photo album, right, or storage on your device. Exactly. And between being able to have that balance of the encryption, which enables security, right, and trust to create the scarcity, and then the blockchain, right, being that ledger, right, but that's really open, where everybody's sending and receiving photos, right, and it's acting as a library that we could all see to know that you sent photo 1 to Brandon, photo 2 to me, and that you no longer hold them, right? We're all privy to that, and that's where the open source element comes into, right? I love the way that you really provided a deep history of, from the technology side, how it really, eroded the traditional technologies that existed, right, the legacy technologies, and opened up this community that really advertently created blockchain. And like you said, we may have never had it without that natural progression, right, of just chaos and timing, and you never know what could come out of it. And blockchain was one of those things. And then, of course, as it dives in further, the open source side is also like a new social, right, brand calling as well, because in order, even though we know it's encrypted, even though we know there's scarcity, how do you still instill trust? And the only way to do that is full transparency. And like you said, there's a full transparency to the developers, right? They can see who created this code base, when were the latest changes made, who were they made by, while also participating in a community that all wants to see something succeed, so they can all code, contribute in their own way, and push that to the public ledger where everybody could see what's the latest version and who changed what, right? Mm-hmm. And that same transparency comes out into the currency side with Bitcoin, where at any given point in time, right, it doesn't say people's names, but each one of us has a Bitcoin wallet. And if we all know whose wallet address, right, it's very easy to type that in. And we can see how much Bitcoin are you holding, where have you sent it last, right, where do you like to buy it? And that level is kind of the second side of the coin of open source software, right? It creates transparency to the consumer market while also advancing innovation on the back end through engineers, because everybody's getting access without having to pay a license to even play with the technology, right? And for those that can't imagine, kind of how this technology took place, right? The simplest thing we can look back to is Microsoft Word, right? Where like you touched on. And when that first started, how could they stop somebody from copying a license? The only way was to make sure they printed off the picture, AKA a CD-ROM, right? And they mailed that to you after you bought it online. And that's how they knew you only had one copy, because they printed it. They allowed no digital copy, right? And now we've all seen them go to cloud, right? And we can have a cloud license and they know who's who. A lot of that is also driven on, advancement of legacy technology, but in the growing environment today and letting it scale, right? A lot of that's based on blockchain. It's based on artificial intelligence, Python, and a lot of these other open source technologies that emerged. Mm-hmm. And we're also seeing open source a lot more on all these cloud platforms, right? AWS and Microsoft, they're letting everybody get access to AI for free as long as you're paying for a server, because they want to see people innovate. And that's really where, the whole community is going. So I just loved how you touched on the scarcity and the technical elements. And I kind of just wanted to give the listeners a little bit, of an analogy of something that we've all probably been through that is listening. And that's kind of what you're seeing, right? The digitalization of that Microsoft license is the same digitalization of the dollar, which is now, starting to present its value in different forms of cryptocurrencies, right? As well as ones that act to mirror, the dollar itself. Mm-hmm. So it's just a very interesting, obviously, progression that I think a lot of people aren't aware of how fast it's progressing. And every year it's only getting quicker and quicker because of both the consumers being able to have that transparency and trust, and that compounded effect of engineers, around the world, millions of people contributing to projects that they truly believe in. Mm-hmm. So kind of with that landscape out there, Brandon, I'm curious, what did you learn new? I know you're in the crypto space as well. But kind of, how have you been navigating that space? And, based on Corey's and I's best attempts at, describing or creating a brief synopsis of it, is there anything else you'd add on top of that?
I would just add that both of you dropped the mic. I was just going to bail when Corey started talking. He started talking. I mean, that pretty much, I was thinking like in my head, I'm trying to pay attention to what he's saying, but I'm thinking in my head, like, all right, clip point is here, clip point is there. This is gold. That summary you just gave, and Brian, your summary as well. Both of those summarize everything that anybody wants to know. Well, I would say like 90% of what people need to know. I mean, there's a few other things that they're going to be interested in. Those are the questions that I have now. So I know, Corey, you mentioned first the different coding languages, and I just want to say, for most of our audiences is like probably 25 to like 50-year-old, guys and girls, whatever. If you have kids, get them involved in coding language early. I know that Corey mentioned Python. Like, get them involved in STEM, get them involved in stuff like that. It really will make a huge difference. I think Roblox is another one and stuff like that. Get them involved in some type of programming or something, because it's going to give them a competitive edge moving forward. So I just want to say that. The second thing was, it drives me crazy to hand a check I want to pay everybody in Bitcoin, right? If a service person comes over to my house, I don't see why I'm not paying them on my phone right here in front of me. I don't know why I'm writing a check to them and it has my number on it. It has my bank account number on it. It has my address on it. The only thing it doesn't have is my social security number. I don't understand it. I don't understand why I carry around a credit card or a Mac card and actually slide it through a machine with 50,000 people watching. And not only that, everything's on camera. But on top of not only sliding the card or putting the card in, now they want me to put my PIN that's secure in there in front of everybody else in cameras and everything else. It's no wonder why cards get hacked. There's money coming out left and right. But my one question is that I have for really both of you is when you hear of crypto getting hacked, it is not the blockchain that is getting hacked. It has nothing to do with that. That is tight. That is secure. Nothing is getting hacked there. What is it that's getting hacked? Because I know that people are fearful of that. Oh, this gets hacked. But it is the system. It is the platform of some type of thing. Can both of you maybe explain? Take a minute or two explain of a hacking case. What do you hear like?
Yeah. So certainly. So if I were to if I had to separate this into how do I word this? Into two eras of hacking. So the first era of hacking, in regards to cryptocurrency, started with exchanges, and then the second era is with smart contracts. All right. So in regards to exchanges, I think something that a lot of people don't really get or understand is that a lot of exchanges started off as hobbies. They were not, if I had to guess, I don't think the operators of these exchanges, yes, they got into it for money, but also for the love of the idea and the community. But I don't think they really understood that this is a quasi bank.
Mhm.
It's a mix of a bank and a stock exchange. And I think they might have understood it to a degree, but they didn't they didn't think of it that serious in a sense of security, right? And so when you hear the first exchange that got hacked, Mount Gox actually stands for Magic the Gathering Online Exchange. It was a platform for trading magic cards, not for cryptocurrency, right? And so you have to think, well, they had all this infrastructure set up, but they probably didn't really think about securing it. And so that was the first major hack in cryptocurrency. Then you have some other exchanges like Cryptopia. I was actually on Cryptopia. I had an account on Cryptopia. Um, and one of the things when you read about the guys behind Cryptopia, they admitted, they said, well, we started this essentially like a hobby, but then it just grew so fast that we had to hire people, we had to quit our jobs, and they had all the trappings of good problems in a startup, the growth, but then it was not as secure as they believed it to be, and they got drained. And you know there's numerous stories of
But that's not the block. That has nothing to. The blockchain is 100%
secure, but
secure.
what's getting hacked, or what's getting hacked in these examples, are the websites that are hosting or facilitating the trades of these different currencies. So what's happening is an exchange is basically um, computers, or a computer with a number of cryptocurrency wallets and their private keys on the wallet, and it's a database as well. So the database says that Brandon and Brian have, you know, Brandon has Ethereum, Brian has Bitcoin. They want to exchange, and they're trying to find a common ground. And in the database, we're just switching who has what. But then guess what? Brian wants to repatriate the Ethereum to his own wallet. And so the exchange needs to be able to trigger the private key to sign the transaction, to send the currency out to the other wallet, to the wallet that Brandon has. But in between that, they want to get their cut as well. And so where the compromise is happening is that the private key that controls the wallet with all the currency in it, that's what's getting compromised. Wherever they're storing it is being accessed by bad actors, by hackers, and that those hackers are then they take the private key, and then they mount it into another wallet, and they say, oh wow, look at all this Ethereum here, and we just send it to another wallet, and that's it. That's how they're getting hacked. So some of the best practices in regards to an exchange is, well, you don't keep all your currency in a hot wallet. And so there are a lot of exchanges now, they keep a certain percentage of their holdings in cold storage. It's basically private keys that are temporarily removed from accessing the internet. And so that's the first era of hacking in regards to cryptocurrency, attacking an exchange, and accessing all these different, all their private keys, and then thus the currency held in them. In regards to the second era, which is smart contracts are very interesting because they basically automate previously manual tasks in a sense. Um, and this is another innovation we've never really had before, money that actually could perform actions based off of triggers and events. When you send $1 to someone else, you hand someone $1, you don't expect that dollar to do backflips or do anything. It's just paper, right? But with a smart contract, when you send Ethereum or whatever else using a smart contract, it's like you're sending $1, and in the margins or in the borders or the perimeter of the dollar, you're writing instructions for it to do something once it gets to the intended recipient. Now with the smart contracts, this code is typically written in Solidity, which is essentially a dialect of JavaScript. There can be holes, there can be bugs in it, and people are exploiting these smart contracts. And some smart contracts, they can either perform actions or they can lock up currency. So in the case of like a DEX, which is a decentralized exchange, it's going to facilitate market making sure that the pool of assets are balanced. So that could be exploited. Hopefully it doesn't get exploited. Hopefully they have, good enough auditors and developers that are constantly, tightening up the code so that this doesn't happen. But yeah, in regards to hacking, they're hacking the smart contract. They're looking for flaws and vulnerabilities in the code and exploiting them to allow to interact with the smart contract to compel the smart contract to drain itself into the wallet of their choice, essentially. But the wallet itself that's secured by cryptography, the private key, that's not getting unwound, or the public wallet address, that's not getting unwound to extract the private key to send the transactions. What's getting exploited is the vulnerabilities that were not found in the smart contract itself. And so when people say, well, Bitcoin is insecure because it's getting hacked and stuff like that, it's not getting hacked. It's that the platform, in regards to exchanges, they're not doing the best that they could in regards to security, right? And then in regards to the smart contracts that are being deployed, they're not getting audited as best as they could to avoid these issues from happening.
Wow. Yeah. You could literally watch anybody that's listening to this, you could watch 50 hours of YouTube video and read 50 different pieces of content, and you wouldn't get that simple explanation that Corey just gave of the two different ways. So we're definitely going to share that. I don't know if we're going to get to everything tonight, but I think we're going to have Corey back and talk about some NFT stuff as well, Brian. At another time. So
definitely, I think tonight will be good to lay the foundation. Corey, couldn't agree more with what the vulnerabilities you presented. And I think just to kind of add an anecdote in case people are not familiar with some of the terminology you use, right? Because you use it very clearly in regards to what the flaws are. So as a brief recap, right, the exchanges are pretty much like the TD Ameritrades if we want to just look at the stock market and things that people are, most likely already have on their phone, right? And when you are going to TD and you're saying, I want to buy 50 shares of Apple, right? You're just typing in on your front end 50 shares of Apple, right? And when you hit submit on the back end, TD is going to all of their banking partners, right? And seeing who owns that Apple and who wants to sell it at that price, right? And we all trust those experiences to be secure. But in the past, right, they've been hacked as well. Whether they thoroughly go missing, right, most of the time they're recovered because all these banks are insured, right? But there are vulnerabilities when everybody's building the new technology. But much like you were saying, Corey, right, what's even happening in TD's scenario is they're the ones that are technically owning that Apple stock for you on their platform under your name, right? But whoever is holding that certificate of stock is Brian Weiner, sponsored by TD, right? TD is the underwriter on that stock. And what you mean by the keys, right, is in the crypto world, our keys are essentially our account number and our routing numbers of our checking accounts, right? For those that won't know exactly what the keys mean. And on the exchanges, you don't have access. You're not the only one, right? You technically see them. You could copy and paste them, but you're leaving that wallet, and they call them hot wallets because they're online, they're on the internet, and they can be seen and they can be accessed because the blockchain, again, is open source and open for everybody to see. And what happens is, because you don't own your keys, you essentially don't own the key to your safety deposit box, right? Somebody else has copies of it that's facilitating transactions on your behalf. If they lose that key, right, or they drop it out of their pocket, which in the digital world means they left it, in their code for somebody else to see, someone's going to take that key and they can access your box and do whatever activities they want with the assets that are in there. So when we say cold storage, a lot of people will have to look into it a little bit more. But you want to look up like hardware wallets, right, which is essentially like a thumb drive that you would save files on traditionally, but it's fully encrypted and it's built to just store cryptocurrency in particular. And it essentially takes your assets, right, your crypto, whatever it may be, off the internet and into cold storage. So that's why we call it cold. You have to plug in that ledger and connect it to the internet to facilitate transactions. Your assets aren't just sitting online somewhere in an exchange in a different country, right, per se. So I really loved, how you broke that down. And I think the only other thing, that a lot of more people are seeing across the board today, right, is just a lot of spamming attacks, pushing attacks, right? They're happening in employee, work offices, and cybersecurity companies are looking at them a lot just for getting any type of information, let alone crypto information, right? And in the crypto world, the thing is just protect your keys. It's essentially don't give somebody the username and password to your bank account, right? It's the same rules that apply. So Brandon, I love that you brought up, some of the concerns, because I think those are very important, for people that are starting to, gain more awareness of the space. Those are always some of the top concerns because we do hear those stories, and those are always, the top news articles that we see as well. But on the flip side of that, Corey, right, going into more some of the benefits, and leading into what your platform is helping facilitate for businesses, right, with Greenery, what are some of the key ways that businesses should look to investigate blockchain technology to see how it can help them? Or, what are maybe some use cases of how other companies are applying this technology in a meaningful way?
Yeah, so I think the easiest example or easiest application or the application use case is authenticity in regards to like think of like sneakers. So I mean, sneakers is like a whole subculture in and of itself. I haven't really gotten into it yet, but like I've been watching from the sidelines. It's very interesting. But one of the things that you do that is a problem is fake shoes, fake sneakers, and there's really no way currently to authenticate that they're truly from the factory. They haven't been tampered with X, Y, and Z. Other than someone with a really good eye examining the shoe, and being able to figure out, well, okay, this wasn't made, this wasn't made by Nike, this wasn't made by Adidas, and so in regards to authenticating like luxury items, that could be a use case. um Also in regards to supply chain and supply chain logistics, being able to inject or like have a provenance in a sense. So when you think of provenance, provenance is provenance is a term from the art world in regards to the authenticity of a Jackson Pollock, or Rembrandt or whoever else, right? You want to know, well, okay, um, it left this house, or it left from this art gallery and then went to this other art gallery, and then this buyer bought it at Christie's, and then this guy put it on sale at Sotheby's, and blah blah blah. And there's a provenance, there's a ledger where people are writing this down, and they're authenticating that, okay, this is truly what it is. This is not, some forger in his basement, that just left the art store and made this, and so in regards to using it or applying that same concept of provenance to items, whether it's determining their authenticity or determining their safety. So you think of like food. I mean, listen, how many times have we heard of food recalls, in the past 10 years or past 20 years? And, you know, if you hear of, a salmonella outbreak, wherever, in the West Coast, and you're in the East Coast, you want to be able to know some way, somehow, um, that the food that you picked up at the grocery store has not been affected by this in some way, shape, or form. And so having a provenance in regards to not only our clothing, but also our food, and even like, like a Carfax in a sense. I mean, Carfax is one of the first instances that at least that I know of, where it was tracking the health or the history of a car, right? Um, is it all inclusive? Is it, the end all be all? Maybe not, but then it's a really good start. But having something like that straight from the manufacturer itself, where each time, once the car left the manufacturer, first time it gets serviced, hey, we add this record to its record on the blockchain, then we move on. It gets its first oil change, we add that record. So there's a true from source to consumer tracking of the car's health. Because listen, you go and buy a car somewhere, you know wherever, right? You have to take the dealership's word that it is what it is. It's only until after a couple weeks you drive that, oh man, there's an engine knock, wheels wobbly, whatever. You don't want to deal with that. So, long story short, the way that um, the way that blockchain can be applied is using it as a provenance, or using it to track um, our items from the manufacturer, or from the source to the consumer, and even to the secondary market, where the consumer may pass it on to someone else, whether it's by sale or by some kind of exchange.
Exactly. No, and I think you explained that so well, Corey, right? Because I think what we just did a nice thing, it was diving into the cryptocurrency world a little bit, right? Which
Mhm.
is an application of blockchain, which I think a lot of people get confused on, right? They think blockchain and cryptocurrency are synonyms for one another, but
Mhm.
cryptocurrency is a use case of blockchain, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's just a big myth to help people, dispel that association of those titles, because they both become trendy at the same time, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And what I love what you said, right, is the providence, the authenticity, right, being able to track, right? Because what blockchain really does, right, is it allows us, leveraging cryptography, right, to know that the information we're assigning to something is authentic, right? And we're knowing when it's being there because of the transparency of blockchain. And we know that nobody can manipulate that record, right, that was published because of the security of that blockchain, right? So everything of all the information in there is secure. And what I think more companies need to recognize is that blockchain acts as a ledger of digital assets, right? Whether those assets are shoes, like you said, right? Being able to say for Nike, right? And we're all seeing it with their NFTs now. I'll try to not dive into NFTs because I think that's a monster on its own. But it's, that essentially what blockchain is going to do is it's going to create the tightest connection between the physical and the digital world that we've ever seen, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to information. And because of that security that it has, it allows you to digitally authenticate any asset. And from there, you can track any of the activities that happen with that asset, right? And in the cryptocurrency world, everybody assumes every cryptocurrency is trying to replicate the dollar, right? Or replace money. But that's really not the case, right? And as anybody dives deeper, they'll see there's different projects. And since we're just talking about the supply chain one, don't want to go into too many cryptocurrencies, but there is one called Chainlink, right? And their goal is to be the global supply chain solution. And the only reason you'd be using their tokens, right, is because that's the value or that's the tender of that platform for that digital utility, right? So that's why you would be holding it. But I love how you said that, because I think a lot of people, again, think it has to relate to the money or the financial aspects of their business, right? Yeah. But it can relate to tracking consumer goods. You could use that data to improve customer experiences around food, right? Showing that all of your goods are locally sourced, right? There's so many different applications. If you just start to think about where does trust matter the most with my clients or my employees, right? Is that in your supply chain for operations or letting your customers knowing where the food comes? That same information can be used for both use cases, right? And I think that's where businesses aren't fully recognizing that this is just a digital utility. And when you're looking at your business, it's what are the things that you wish you could track better? What are the things you wish you could share but are highly secure, right? And you need a better way to make that public without giving everybody access to your financial statements, right? And I love that, you kind of touched on that authenticity, because that shows that you can trust this. And now the blockchain is just your infrastructure, right, or your foundation to scale that information and that trust and transparency. So I loved how you really dove into that side of it. Brandon, did you have a similar understanding, or did you always see blockchain and cryptocurrency as different, or kind of one is the same?
I am learning a ton here. I mean, I thought I knew a little bit, but I didn't know jack. I mean, after listening to you two, I mean, what the heck? I want to ask this question. And just let me know if I'm incorrect in saying this. I see blockchain being more heavily adopted and utilized in shipping and transportation than I do in crypto. It's just that crypto has the more flash and dash because there's money associated with it. Is that correct to kind of say it's more say, or does crypto kind of still rule the blockchain market versus shipping, transportation? Because I've heard so much about the block in transportation and everything else like that. And I know that's such a huge market, with everything going on right now. So I just want to get your feedback on there and throw that out there. Am I incorrect in saying that? Is it like, are we not? Or is it still crypto that rules that?
I think I would say they're about equivalent. I'd say they're about equivalent. The thing with cryptocurrency in regards to the blockchain is that it was the most obvious use case. Like, hey, we're now able to create scarcity or dictate scarcity in digital environments. What's the first thing we're going to do? Create value. Well, we can also create authenticity of items because we're securing this with cryptography. That's very strong cryptography at that, and a mechanism of decentralizing and distributing the task of securing this entire mechanism. cryptocurrency was just the obvious use case in regards to tracking things. I think it will catch on. I think it will catch on. You know, a lot of businesses still have this idea or this mindset that everything needs to be held close to the chest. They're always guarding their jewels, their cards, and I think as time goes on and as things change throughout the world, people want more. They want more transparency. They want more corporate responsibility for things. They want to know that things are ethically sourced as well. And so, to your point, I do believe that the use case or the knowledge of blockchain in regards to tracking consumer goods or just even any kind of goods, it'll become more commonplace. But I don't know if it'll outstrip the use of cryptocurrency. I do see that they it'll get on parity in a sense. It'll become equivalent. In the business world, everything is tracked on Tesla, so everything is tracked on Ethereum sidechain or whatever. So yeah, that's how I see it.
How do you see it, Brian? What do you see in your market?
Yeah, no, I think
you work with so many different market segments too.
Yeah,
so.
Definitely. No, I think, Corey said it best, right? I think the way that blockchain emerged is it was a creation of the people of the internet. And what I mean by the people of the internet is I mean the technology enthusiasts of the world, the engineers of the world. This was done, in free market with free labor created by people that wanted to create the first money of the internet that was fair for everybody. And I think a lot of people don't recognize, if you're not in the tech world, if you're not an engineer, you may see it like in your workplace, right? That these people are more, intertwined with one another, but we have very deep communities. And when they attack a mission, especially one like the challenge that's really always been going on, I think for every engineer, is how can you create a digital money? It's always like the utopia of a problem statement in the engineering world. And when blockchain emerged, Bitcoin and others alike, that many have tried as well, and Bitcoin just came out of it because of the model that they had created, without going too deep. But I think that was just what I would say, like the public worlds and communities, like the internet communities problem statement that they wanted to solve. And I think they know that what we saw in the last 10 to 15 years is major companies that had significant capital, right, could build the technology that the world needed, but individuals couldn't because of the cost to develop these things at that time. But the progression of everything, like Corey mentioned, open source technology, cloud computing, AI, right, hardware increases, right, things are much more sustainable from a cost perspective. A lot more people can contribute than ever before. And that's why we saw us go after the money use case first, because they know if we can decentralize money, then we can slowly decentralize every single other aspect of the world, right? Money is what drives and facilitates every transaction or interaction between organizations. So I think, much to Corey's point, like the communities and the public internet people, we want to solve the money problem because we want everybody to be equal and be able to get paid easily, et cetera. And I think, much to your point, Brandon, where we're starting to see businesses recognize like the most applicable use case for them to apply blockchain is around supply chain or something specific around compliance, where the integrity of that information needs to be highly secure, but it also needs to be transparent, whether it's just within the organization or whether it's out to consumers as well. So I think, much to Corey's point, I would say, cryptocurrency is more of like the world's problem that we're all trying to solve. And if you really look, there's no major company, building on the blockchain outside of like Square by Jack, right? But they're an open source company, and those investing in it that believe in it to drive it. But everybody that's mining, right, there's bigger factories, but there's still small facilities all the way across the entire United States of individuals that just believe in it. And now that that's gained such a dominance where people thought it was just going to be a fad, now we're going to start seeing more and more companies explore, what does this mean to them? And again, much to Corey's point, between the pandemic and just the way that the whole world's been changing, social issues are things that employees hold close to themselves now, consumers hold close, and they want brands and companies that they're working for or buying from to have some continuity with their beliefs, right? And that's where we're going to see more transparency, whether the companies would like to have it or not, because you're going to see companies that are comfortable, or maybe new companies emerging with this full transparent approach, and it's going to force the more traditional ones to move towards this new what I would say standard in the industry. It's not there yet, but I think we'll definitely see it there over the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have one other quick question, and then we'll get back on the tracks, Bri. I promise you, man. I'm just interested in this. I think it's interesting for other people too. So I think this is one of the worries of people is the ease to move money. It is difficult to move money if you want, and I'm talking outside of the crypto space. If you're with a bank, and I'm not against big banks or anything else like that. I'm a big fan. They work. They're incredible. I'm heavily invested in everything else like that. I'm just asking you as a question to learn more for myself and the people listening as well. Is it's easier to move money in crypto than it is a normal bank, and I think sometimes people relate that to crime, I guess, because they can move high. It's easier to hide money or whatever else like that. So I'd like to just get your kind of feedback, both of you, just quickly. What is that all about? What does that mean? What goes on with that whole piece? Because I think that's confusing for people too.
Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah. So, so this is something. This is very interesting because when you do talk about cryptocurrency and you come across detractors, critics, some of the things they cite as well as used for crime, drug dealing, blah blah blah, X, Y, and Z. And the thing is, I came across a quote, and I'm paraphrasing it. I came across it on Twitter. And essentially, the writer, the author of this quote said, any technology that is just easy to use or significant can be used by both criminals and regular citizens. There's no demarcation between the two. There's no difference between the two. Means to say, guess what? A lot of hackers use MacBooks. I mean, it's a fact, actually. A lot of hackers use MacBooks. A lot of hackers use Windows laptops. Use the Windows operating system. A lot of hackers use Linux. Should we start cracking down on Linux and the distribution of MacBooks? Because we found that when we raided their house, they had a whole bunch of MacBooks laying around, and they were using iPhones as well. Criminals will use any tool available that the public has access to. Now, when we're talking about financial crime, when we're comparing financial crime from cryptocurrency to the traditional fiat world, in the past 10 years, numerous banks have been cited in regards to money laundering, right? This is well-documented information. It happens, or that's what happens there. But a lot of the critics and detractors, they make it appear as if crime just came about, or financial crime just started with the advent of cryptocurrency, whereas that's not the case. The other thing is, in regards to crime using cryptocurrency, it's very unlike crime before, where it took a lot of work to trace the criminal, right? Let's say someone robbed a bank, or robbed a jewelry store or whatever, right? They would take the money and they would launder it somehow, or move the jewels somehow. They find a fence or whatever, right? And that took a lot of work, a lot of legwork to trace it and catch the criminal, right? In regards to cryptocurrency, the hack that happened at Bitfinex, right? The hack that happened at Bitfinex, right? This couple, they really tried their best to obfuscate their transactions and to hide the money. I mean, if you're sitting on $1 million, right? It's an itch that you definitely want to scratch at some point. It's too enticing not to spend, right? But the problem is when you steal Bitcoin or you steal Ethereum or any kind of cryptocurrency, you will get caught. It is inevitable because you're leaving breadcrumbs all along the way. At some point you want to keep the lights on, so you're going to convert it into fiat currency, and even if you didn't convert it into fiat currency, let's pretend that you could pay Con Edison in Bitcoin. I mean, you stole the money from this place, you paid for it over here. We know that the money left this wallet over here and it made its way over to Con Edison somehow. How did it do this? Well, here's the middleman that's sitting, somewhere in Manhattan. That's how it happened, And so I think, if I were a part of a government agency, I would encourage people to use this technology more. You're making it so much easier for us to find you people, We never had this before, It takes years for auditors and forensic accountants to reverse transactions in the real world, in regards to bank fraud or whatever else. It takes hundreds of man hours, to catch people. And it's not to say that it's so much easier in the cryptocurrency world in terms of time, but in terms of the threads, the tracing, it's become so much easier, But I guess overall, my perspective in regards to cryptocurrency facilitating crime, I think that's a distraction in a sense, because the technology is so much more than just facilitating crime. And even if we banned all cryptocurrency, crime will still occur, And so it's not the facilitator that people believe it to be, is my perspective.
What about you, Brad?
No, I completely agree with Corey. I think with any innovation, it can be scary when it first comes, right? People heard robotics were going to come to warehouses. They thought everybody was going to be out of a job, within 2 to 3 years, right? That's not the way that, although technology is progressing faster than it before, it still requires an adoption curve, even if that adoption curve is faster, right? And I think with cryptocurrency, much like Corey said, any bad actors exist in every environment. And when there's a new tool for them to utilize that the government may be behind on, they'll always utilize that tool first, right? So maybe in the first year or so, yes, more illicit activity was being done with cryptocurrencies, but that doesn't mean that it could not be tracked, right? It's just that they went to use this new tool that people were unfamiliar with. So therefore it's a bad actor tool, right? And that's all it's used for. And what we've seen now, right, and I won't go too deep, but if people are really interested, there was just a Senate hearing about a week or two ago where senators asked this specific question. And there's a lot of companies that have grown now, and they're on-chain analytic companies. And what they do is, again, if for everyone that forgot, cryptocurrency and blockchain is open source. There's 1 or 2 private blockchains, but outside of that, like Corey said, You're going to be swapping to other currencies. You're going to hit something at some point that shows the flow, even if you sent a funds through 1,000 fake wallets to then have it pop out at the end. They just need to wait for you to pop it out, and then they'll use that one address, and they'll see all the other transactions that came or went from that one. And it may take them some time to create that chart of what happened, but they'll definitely do it 10 times faster than trying to find physical evidence in the real world of, fraudulent checks or how they were spent, or, taking out credit cards and other people's names and identity theft, right? Those activities are 10 times more time consuming. And for those that want decentralized money, they're pretty open to fair regulations and monitoring of the blockchains to ensure that illicit activity is not at the forefront, because we know that it's a deterrent to anybody else getting into the space. And by anybody, we mean, hedge funds, significant corporations, those that would really, bring it into a true digital currency, and not just one of the people, but one of, everybody, organizations, et cetera.
Mhm.
So I think, much to Corey's point, he really hit it, nail on the head. And now that, since I don't think we still hear that a little bit here and there, more from senators and people that aren't as fully educated on how it's advanced, since some early days and usage of different attacks and illicit activity. And now there's companies that are going to, make their entire living on working with the government to ensure that doesn't happen. And just like any other industry, it's going to keep evolving. We're going to have experts come from other spaces. And I don't think, it's going to be anything just like money laundering systems track, Wall Street and everything else. There'll be similar solutions across the entire cryptocurrency and blockchain space. But I think it is, a very good question, and one that many probably have at the front of their mind, Brandon. So I'm happy we were able to dive into that. But Corey, I know we're going in a little lengthy here. We still have, some good time left, but I want to make sure, we have plenty of time to dive into Greenery today.
Mhm.
So if you're comfortable, I figured what we'll do is, instead of giving, an overview of it, we can kind of let you share your screen, and we can give, ask some questions as you demo it and give a solid presentation that way, so the audience can have a visual as well.
Okay, certainly. Yeah. So,
Awesome. Let me pull that up for you.
yeah. So, this is still pre-beta software.
So it's an early look, everybody.
I like it.
Early look. And so essentially, what this is a self-custody cryptocurrency wallet with accounting functionality. And the problem that we're solving is that right now in the cryptocurrency world, yes, there are some platforms that do track your transactions, whether it be from a wallet or from an exchange, or you manually input it, but they're not wallets. And there are wallets such as MetaMask, such as Exodus, and whatever else that allow you to control your cryptocurrency, but they don't offer the accounting functionality or accounting principles that you would expect in a QuickBooks or whatever else. And so our solution is to take the best of both worlds and put it together into this package. Because our thesis is that, well, if we're saying that cryptocurrency is going to be a currency and we're going to denominate goods and services in cryptocurrency, then therefore you need a platform to account for the transaction. So, if you're selling sneakers or chairs, if you sell 5 chairs or 5 pairs of shoes, you don't really need to keep much records for that, if you don't want to. But if you're selling 50, 500, you need to keep records for that. You need to keep track of vendors. You need to keep track of how much each unit costs and how much you're selling it for. And that's where the whole accounting component comes into play. And that's what we want to get ahead of. The other part is that, even in regards to NFTs, and I know you don't want to go too much into that, but if you really think about it, that's inventory, and if you sell, 10, 20, 50 NFTs, how are you tracking that? you know. And so that's where this this platform is trying to, well, will fulfill the need or fill that gap in a sense. And so just looking right here, this is what you see when you open up the application. This is live, by the way. Um, I'm not rich. um, so this is essentially, this is your portfolio. It shows you your dashboard. It shows you what the values from your dashboard. This right here, these are different indexes, right? And we're still adding and tweaking this a bit. Um, and so basically, it's showing you a composite. Think of it like the FANG index in a sense. Um, this is the dashboard. So yeah, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Tezos.
So for those listening, Corey, essentially, right, the main thing is their dashboard where they're going to connect in and they can sync their wallets from the different cryptocurrencies. And then you have the nice asset overview tab as well. That's showing the breakdown of all the assets that they've imported, right? And then the rest is where they can kind of facilitate the business activities once they have their wallets and their assets into the platform. Is that correct?
So this right here is you can generate new addresses here, and you can import addresses as well from other platforms and control it. And so in regards to seeing the activity, and I'll get to that shortly, we're still building that out. Actually. So right here, this is a wallet. You could, send currency from it. So you can send to a regular cryptocurrency address. You can also send to an Ethereum ENS address. And so ENS, or a human readable address, essentially what that is think of it as DNS, but for cryptocurrency. So what it's doing is that you're using a human readable address, like think of google.com, and it's resolving the IP address. So, it's resolving the wallet address. So, in the case of Google.com, the IP address for Google is 8.8.8.8, right? In regards to cryptocurrency address, this is the cryptocurrency address. And so, an easier way to get to that address is type in corey.eth. And why is this is important? Because a lot of people won't admit to it, but a lot of people have sent cryptocurrency to the wrong address.
Yes.
It's a problem.
I've done that on Venmo.
Yeah. So it happens. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the likelihood of errors with the various functions in our platform. We also support unstoppable domains, which is another human readable address platform, but they do it in the form of NFTs. So if I type in wallet, it does the resolution here for unstoppable domains. And then for Tezos, we have Tezos domains. And this service takes a little bit more time, but there it goes. So resolve the address. This wallet right here is staked, so the value keeps going up. And so a question I had gotten before was, well, could you just do something like a coin tracker and just put the value, what you think, the value of your holdings into the wallet, and just track the gain and loss from there. And even though that would be okay or whatever, the problem with that is in regards to currencies that are staked, proof of stake networks, where you're staking your currency and as a reward for removing currency from circulation, the network rewards you with more currency to further incentivize you from not spending your currency and locking it up. The value keeps growing, right? And you need to be able to query the address to constantly get the value of your holdings. And so that's something that was important for us in regards to making this not just a tracker, but actually a wallet where it has the full functionality of being able to generate addresses, send currency, and even in the future to stake that currency inside the wallet as well.
Very cool. And that makes complete sense, right? So eventually, right, with being that this is like a standalone bank for businesses, right? And I think I want to push a lot of people to think outside of the US. I know a lot of our listeners will be here in the US, right? But again, the US has one of the most mature infrastructures, period, across the globe, especially when it comes to banking, when it comes to being able to form an LLC, right, for $400 within a week and be doing business as whatever name you want to be very quickly, right, and form it with partners. There's a lot more friction in that process and a lot more restrictions, right, in other countries outside of the US. So such a solution like this can allow someone to spin up their own business, right, be able to send invoices, be able to complete payroll, be able to maintain all of their assets without ever having to go the traditional approach of, creating a formal LLC or going to the bank and having to set up a business bank account and get checks and wait a month, right, to get access to send wires, etc. This will let them complete all of those financial operations and business functions within one solution, while also allowing them to, entertain or look into alternative capital like deployment models, right? Whether it's staking, which is much like, putting money into a CD, right? With a bank, for those that aren't too aware, you're determining to lock up X amount of value for X amount of time sometimes, right? And the longer you leave it in there, they're incentivizing you with what we could call interest or dividends, right? For leaving that money available for the community. So I think it's just such an impressive tool. I think a lot of people, will come watch this video and then they'll do some research and digging to really understand, how fast this space is growing and what it can have for their business. But I love what you're doing in this space, Corey. I think, there's so many, disenfranchised businesses or individuals that would love to start a business but don't have great access to capital, right, in the traditional sense. And a tool like this is going to let them save years, of trying to go through an approach that has a lot of restrictions or barriers, for them in particular.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly, what I saw in regards to building out this platform with my partners and I, outside of the US in regards to accessing capital. I mean, well, just in general, our financial system globally is very siloed.
Yes.
Just like with our layer twos in the fiat world, like Venmo and PayPal and Cash App, I consider those like layer two solutions, right? Those are siloed. If you wanted to send someone money over Venmo and they're in India, it's not going to happen.
Correct.
If you wanted to send someone money over in Cash App to someone in Italy, not happening. And PayPal kind of works here, kind of works there. It's not really consistent across the board. Western Union is not an option.
Yes.
It just doesn't really work that well. And there are some other players here and there, but generally speaking, none of them have really overcome the hurdles that fiat still has in regards to bridging the gap of financial transactions across jurisdictions. They just haven't done it. Cryptocurrency does this seamlessly and within a minute. I mean, I could send you Dogecoin, in 2 seconds, literally. It takes 2 seconds to go from one wallet to the next. And so in a platform like this, you know, if you are someone in Nigeria, for instance, and you set up a DAO, and or you just have a business and you're selling goods, um, and you want to be able to accept U.S. dollars, for instance, right? Nigeria uses the naira, and their banking system is actually pretty good, but the issue is that their their currency is facing inflation, and so holding on to naira is not secure, essentially. And being able to accept US dollars, I mean, that would be huge for any business person in Africa or the Caribbean or South America. But how can you accept US dollars if you can't get Venmo or Cash App or whatever else? Well, you can use Greenery and accept USDC or Tether, USDT or GUSD. And these are stable coins pegged to the US dollar. So now you effectively have US dollars in your possession. And you couldn't you could not do that with a QuickBooks. You download QuickBooks and that's it. You know?
Exactly. No, I think it's huge. I think a lot of people don't understand, like you said, they're siloed, right, companies, because they're still all centralized, because they're still
Mhm.
dependent on the banking relationships that they can form, right, that provide them the liquidity to enable those exchanges. And then at the same time, right, they have to answer to the SEC and they have to be tracked on those transactions. And that's where those silos become. And I think, again, that's just the emphasis of the point we're trying to make, where blockchain really incentivizes the decentralizations of infrastructures, banking being the one that's being targeted the most. And with that, it just democratizes the access, right, to information. In this particular instance, that information is digital currency, right? In others, it can be for the supply chain. In others, it could be authenticity of an asset like shoes or art. But that's really where everything's going. And even here in the US, again, we have such a strong system. A lot of companies may not be seeing where these pitfalls are in their business just yet. But as more and more people get access to the internet, right, we're trying to access global countries and partners, et cetera. Having tools just like Greenery, Corey, are going to be a fundamental asset, where a lot of US companies are going to find the companies they are working for, right, asking them to use a tool like this, even though they prioritize the dollar, right? And that's kind of going to be where the shift comes from. And I'm just very excited to see that. Very excited, to have you on, and appreciate you taking the time to give us the insight into your platform. And we're definitely going to have to follow up with you once you guys launch, and have you on for a longer demo and dive into some product updates. But before we kind of come to an end here, Corey, I'd love to ask all of our guests, a few questions to help our audience understand their mindset on technology, right? And kind of create a new lens, for people that are listening today on that they could maybe apply to their business, or just at how they look at the world as a whole. So, working on such an innovative project, I know technology is, instilled deeply into your life and your day-to-day activities. I'm curious, how would you describe what technology or digital transformation means to you, and how would you communicate that to somebody else?
Technology, I believe, is meant to lower the barrier of access to people, or to lessen the burden of work for people. Um, and so I'll give an example. Farmers, they would first, before they had, metal tools, they would manually till the soil, right? And of course, you can only exert an X amount of energy and X amount of time to do that per day, right? But with the hoe and with, pickaxe or other metal tools, you're able to till a whole acre of land, if you will, probably within a day, especially if you had people to assist you. Then, when you attach that to a horse or oxen, right? Then you're able to till, 4 acres of land in a day, whereas you can only do 1 acre. And then of course we have John Deere, So technology should um, relieve the burden of manual labor off of people and give us more or free up our time to do things that we love to do or need to do, or to just spend more quality time with our loved ones. And that's one side of technology. The other side of technology is to really augment our creativity and our innovation and our ideas, and really take our deep desires in terms of what the world could be, and really bridge it to the real world. I remember writing down, I have the document, a little text document of what Greenery was, gain and loss calculator, blah, 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 blah. Remember the document. And the technology that I was able to harness, I was able to use Electron and Vue.js and this and that or whatever else. And I was able to use these technology, the open source technology, to bring this product to life. And so had I, had things not been open source, I mean, listen, we probably would not be here. The barrier to entry would be through the roof. So technology on one end is supposed to make things easier for people to do, to accomplish their goals within a shorter period of time with less energy output. And then the other part of technology is to take ideas from just abstract, firings of your neurons, to physical products, or digital products that people can actually just use and make their life better. So that's what I believe technology is.
That's awesome. No, and I completely agree with you, Corey. I love to tell people, that technology is just the vehicle, right, to democratize access and decrease barriers or enhance experiences, which all come from really empowering us humans, right, to drive our creativity, right? The things that make humans unique, right, is our perspectives, the ways that we can create associations. And it's not, being able to enter data all day long, right? You don't hire a sales guy to update a CRM, you hire to close deals, right? Yeah. So I love the angle that you put on that, especially the two sides of the coin. And then we'll ask you one more final question here. Might be a little biased on your end, knowing everything we just discussed today, but what technology advancement do you think will have the largest impact over the next 3 to 5 years?
DeFi. And I'll tell you why. So typically, when we think of loans, right? When we think of loans typically fall into 4 categories: vehicles, real estate, education, and business, right? I mean, people take out personal loans or whatever else, but like those are the 4 main categories, right? In regards to DeFi, people are taking out loans to take advantage of market opportunities, right? So you see an opportunity for arbitrage on this exchange, you take out a loan, you put up collateral, whatever else, you take advantage of that opportunity, you pay back the loan, everything is good, right? But the problem in the real world is that loans are not equally distributed. It takes time to access loans. It takes paperwork. It's just difficult, right? Especially if you come from a disadvantaged community, or the financial infrastructure in your country is not as robust as you would want it to be, and so loans could be cumbersome to come about. What I believe is that DeFi will start to spill over into the real world, where you will see people issuing loans for someone in Kenya to get a motorcycle. So hey, you put up your collateral of whatever whatever equivalent of shillings, right? And we will issue you Ethereum or USDC, and then you could purchase your motorcycle, and you pay us back, and then you're free and clear to go within, and you do this within 12 months, right? I can see that happening. I can see someone issuing a loan for a home in, Ghana. Ghana has a booming real estate market. Someone will want to put up a loan or issue a loan. Hey, we could, if you put up X amount of collateral in Ghanaian cedis, I will give you access to X amount of Ethereum. Or education. Someone may want to go for the Security Plus, the Linux Plus, and the Network Plus, all CompTIA certifications, right? But that costs around $1,000 just a certification. So hey, what if you had to put up some kind of collateral, and I'll pay for your certifications, the loan, and you pay us back with a rate of 5% or whatever, right? So that's what I see in the next 5 years. I think as the NFT market has kind of cooled down just a little bit, right? I think the use cases of DeFi in the real world will start to spill over. And I believe with a platform like what we're creating can help track that. If you're issuing loans for someone to, if you're issuing multiple loans, whether it be on Aave or Celsius or whatever other platforms that are out there, you need to be able to track who owes you money, and how long the term of the loan is, and the whatever other stipulations around the loan there is. So yeah, I believe DeFi will eventually eat the world.
That's perfect. No, I couldn't agree more. DeFi is a deeper topic also. So for anybody looking into it, it just stands for decentralized finance, leveraging blockchains and cryptocurrencies to replace a lot of the mechanisms that banks offer us today, outside of being able to be a store of value, which is Bitcoin's utility. But Corey, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. I think this was one of our deepest topics, if not one of the most interesting, that will really get a lot of our listeners thinking from a whole new perspective on, really what the future holds for their business, all these new modern technologies, and hopefully we gave them some insight into the valuable ways that they can apply them. So I just want to thank you again, Corey, for coming on. As we know, everybody, Corey's comfortable with you reaching out to him. His LinkedIn and other socials will be in the description below. And correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, but for everybody to find Greenery, they can go to greenfire.io and find Greenery on your homepage of your website, or of course, reach out to Corey through LinkedIn, and he may be able to get you on to the early beta testing. But thank you again so much, Corey, for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I would like to say thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it. I would love to come on again. And everyone just have a great time. The weather's getting nice. Go outside, get some exercise, soak in the sun.
There we go. That's perfect. We appreciate your time again, Corey. We'll definitely have you on in the future. And goodbye for now, everybody. Have a great day.
All right, then.